All right, I'll go ahead and get started. If this is going up, great. We'll find out later. Looks like somebody's here. Hello, everyone. Today is the 28th of November, 2022. Welcome as you come in. And I decided I would do this morning. Of course, I always try to wait until David Knight's done because I think he gives information that's critical for all of us. But I saw something this morning that convinced me that I needed to talk about it. This is not going to be a religious discussion, so you don't have to go running off if you don't want to do that. I will, however, say that there is something that's akin to it that Pastor Chuck Baldwin has been talking about, combining the problems of politics and use of religious institutions to control the minds of the people. So in the description box below is a video that Pastor Baldwin apparently made yesterday during his sermon, and it's called "The Church, a Pillar of Truth or a Political Toady." I'm not going to cover that today, but we are going to use that information that he put out in a live stream at some point in the next few days, because I want to really go into that in depth, because it goes right along with what I've been saying with all of the subject matters that I talk about, and some that are very uncomfortable for people. And again, Pastor Baldwin would not necessarily or at all agree with me 100%, but that's okay. I don't agree with him 100%. So we're even there. But these subjects need to be discussed, and so I will do that in the next few days, with that video of his in the description box being basically the axis that we are going to work around in our discussion. That's all for that. What I'm really here about today is what I see continuing to occur. And let me just approach it this way. You know that the motto of my channel is the intelligence community is our most dangerous domestic enemy. In fact, it is the world's most dangerous enemy. And it's allied with people like the New World Order, the bankers, people like Klaus Schwab, Rothschilds, the UN, etc., etc. Hello, everyone. And I've been sounding this alarm for a long time. Not that we have a whole lot of power to change it, but I just, when I see these things happen, like what happened here in the not too far distant past, which I'm going to discuss here in a second, I just feel a responsibility to come out and tell you how much you're being lied to and manipulated. And I know most of the people that follow me are aware of this, but I just have to say something. You know, I sit down and I look at these things and I say, why should I even bother to talk about it? My information's not really going anywhere. There are people with a lot more horsepower than I have that can discuss these things. But that doesn't mean that us little people need to be quiet either, depending on others to speak for us. We need to speak up anyway. So, even though my voice is a very small one, quite insignificant, and not really paid any attention to by anybody who has any real horsepower, I'm going to speak it out anyway, because being watchmen on the watchtower and calling and sounding the alarm is still important even for us little folks, okay? So what I saw, believe it or not, it was on Alex Jones' channel on InfoWars, and I just perused that in the morning. I like you can tell I'm not listening to his broadcast today. I just never do anymore. I've got others that I go to for direct information, not all the hype that Alex puts out. Not that he's bad or wrong, but it's just that I just don't need to be entertained for 2 or 3 hours. I would rather, get my information and move on. So I don't need his entertainment. So at any rate. But what I saw was a story, actually 2 stories. The first is about a CIA analyst, former CIA analyst. They always say former CIA. You never leave the CIA. Once you're there, even if you retire, they can come back and they can use you for something. It's like you can never get away from this horrible, horrible institution. But there's a CIA guy on there by the name of Bob Baer. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Baer. Yeah, before Dan, good. You knew exactly what I was going to say before I even said it. Right on, buddy. Thanks. And let me just read you a couple of things that he said, okay? They were quoting, I think it was Steve Watson. I'm not sure who did the story, but they were quoting his interview that he was giving to one of the major networks, okay? I won't name it. I'll just tell you that it's one of the major mainstream networks, okay? And this is what this butthole of a CIA asset said. Putin is going to be all over Twitter now that Twitter doesn't have these controls by the leftists. Now, before I go any further, don't think that I have 100% trust in Elon Musk. You heard me the other day say that I heard a Christian recite Elon Musk's information to support their position. And I said how foolish that is. Okay? So I'm not citing Elon Musk to support my position. I'm telling you what the CIA says about its supposed, if it's really true, loss of control over these information networks that are not run by the intelligence communities. But don't kid yourself. There's no way Elon Musk is going to rid his organization of every single intelligence asset. Okay, it just but the CIA and otherwise, FBI, etc. It's just not going to happen. If he's serious about controlling it, he'll watch things very closely. And he has fired a lot of people, but you know they can influence it by other means, of course, and we know that by accessing or who can access the internet, shutting down portions of the site. I mean, there are all kinds of ways they can do that. But that's the first thing this Bob Baer said, that now that Twitter is a free speech. Notice how they hate free speech. They come after free speech and they come after the Second Amendment. They've already taken away your Fourth Amendment, your Fifth Amendment, all of those others. The states won't stand up for their rights, so, the people have to do it. And then the people are considered to be what? Domestic extremist terrorists because they don't agree with what the government's doing, even if they voice it. Merely voicing your opinion, you become an extremist. You should know about that now. It's wrong. It's wrong and it's evil. So what's this here? Yeah. So Bob Baer said that now Putin is going to be all over Twitter. Like the CIA and the FBI aren't all over Twitter. Like the leftist, let's just say the establishment position is the only one that we should be permitted to hear. Frankly, I want to hear what Putin has to say. And he makes a hell of a lot more sense than that old demented shell of a man that sits in the White House now and can't even find his way out of the Oval Office to go take a dump. Wouldn't be surprised if the British royalty, they have I forget what they're called, but something like keepers of the rear end or something like that. They don't wipe their bottom. Well, I don't think Biden ever does wipe his own bottom. And if he does, he probably mistakes it for somebody else's. I'm just saying. Okay, the other thing that this guy said is that the Russians need a propagandist campaign against the U.S. and against our support for Ukraine. You notice how they continue to push this thing. Everything that's happened is disinformation or lies. Putin said it right. The West, and that means all of them, but run by the U.S., are an empire of lies. They even lie and hurt their own allies, as we did with the Nord Stream pipeline as an example, just as an example. Many others. So this Bear guy is out there talking about how bad it is for us to get both sides of the question, both sides of the story, whether it's Putin or whether it's Trump. And I don't like Trump, but shutting him down wasn't the thing to do. But why did they do it? Oh, he's influenced by Russians. So the people cannot make good decisions, even if they want to, and most of them don't care, but they can't make good decisions without all the information. And when your own government admits that they're trying to restrict you from getting information, that should tell you that they're not the good guys. Now, certainly, there is a lot of censorship on, like this, the war in Ukraine right now. People are not permitted in Russia to make too big a stink. I mean, they do, but not too big a stink. But at least they can talk about it. They don't even want us talking about it because Putin will influence us not to support our war in Ukraine. Well, I don't support the war in Ukraine anyway, and I don't support the shutdowns that put us in this situation where all of our choices have been manipulated. Read between the lines. There's some things you can't say here. This shows you the mindset of these people. It was very plain by our founding fathers. They said the people have to know what's going on. They need to be educated. They have to know what's going on so that they can rightly direct the government through the electoral process. And they've taken all of that away from us. The intelligence community, as I pointed out, and as I pointed out by other people like myself that have been crying about this for a long time, they are the fourth branch of government, and they are the most powerful because we allow it. Nobody in the government is willing to take them on. Nobody in the world is willing to take them on except Russia right at the moment. Putin. We could say China too, but China has another set of problems, right? I like Brian Berletic of the New Atlas, for instance, but he thinks everything that's said about China is propaganda and that China isn't as bad as it looks. Well, I'm not so sure that they aren't as bad as they look. Even though there's a lot of Western propaganda on that, I realize that. But if that's true, and if we're using Chinese propaganda here, as Fauci said, he liked what China did in the lockdowns. They were the ones that convinced him to do it. He doesn't think for himself. And I might add, that's the next thing I want to talk about. Why was his testimony in these hearings behind closed doors? You see how bad this is? What possible national security issue could come out of Fauci and NIH's and CDC's and Pfizer's lies? What? That our government is compromised by these guys? Yeah, that's probably it. Well, I'll tell you what's happened to Fauci. It's real obvious. He's been telling lies for so long. I mean, I saw some statistics about how influenza disappeared when COVID came around, right? Influenza disappeared, right? Well, how could that be? Because masks work so well. What? This is to manipulate people who aren't willing to think for themselves, which is quite a few, or people that have been dumbed down so much by the system that they believe anything that they hear, not people that offer reason. So I think Fauci's gone insane. From what I can tell, from watching him, what he's doing, God makes, there's an old statement, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. God makes men mad. Let me rephrase that. Before God kills or destroys someone, he makes them mad. He makes them insane. Well, Fauci's well on his way, and so is Klaus Schwab for that reason. And Noah Harari. Noah's got that name. He thinks he's really something special, and he's about the most wicked, evil piece of crap on the face of the earth right now. He's worse than Klaus Schwab, actually. Okay, let me see if I got anything more here I want to say. Yeah, I think I've already said it just another way. That the bear wants to control everything, and wants the IC and their propaganda to influence us all the way, and that any criticism of what they're doing is considered extremism, dissent, and Russian propaganda that we swallow, which is baloney. They're going to accuse us anytime we come up against the government and say what you're doing is wrong. Even members of Congress, when they have the guts to do it, like Thomas Massey, like Louis Gohmert, somewhat Matt Gaetz. There are a few of them, not many. Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know they all have their own problems. I don't care about Russell Brand. There are a lot of controlled opposition people out there. I think everybody knows I'm not one. Of course, that's why I don't have. I notice my counts keep dropping, probably because of the religious discussions I have. But I see, I don't care. I figure that God will send people to hear that message that He wants to hear, and I know that the remnant's very small. It's not very big, so I don't anticipate having big counts. All right, I've never wanted. I've never really cared about it. When I did that little thing here some time ago, it was about a year ago. Um, I got some information about the military quietly saying to their officers, basically Lieutenant Colonel below, "Hey, bad things are on the horizon. Get your supplies. You may be losing your job. They're gonna force something on you. You may not want. They got a war they're going to start in Europe. Uh, your family might be without food and water, so start stocking up." I heard all this stuff, and of course, a lot of them were worried about losing their commissions and being court-martialed, etc. And I brought this out, and I had other people say, "Oh, that's not true. That's not true." Well, what's happened? Yes, it has happened. So I said it, and then I had these other channels, even military channels, come out and say I was full of shit. Oh yeah? Well, how many people have been thrown out of this? So look at Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, who testified to Congress about how bad the treatments are. Oh yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about, did I? But these other channels, by the way, a lot of those other channels really are controlled by the intelligence community. They really are. I had veterans organizations come after me back when I did my Boston bombing uh, expose. And they were saying, "Oh, you were never in the Army. You were never even an officer." And then when they couldn't argue with that anymore, they said, "Well, you may have been a lieutenant, but that's a long way from being a lieutenant colonel." Then when they found out I really was a lieutenant colonel, and why they could, I mean, it was unbelievable how they attacked me. It's supposed to be that they don't attack your service, that any service that you do is honorable, not if you stand up against the system and say how rotten it is. So the last thing they said about me is, "Okay, you're a lieutenant colonel, but you were a nobody. You were one of the worst officers ever." Hey, I've never claimed to be anything like Custer was last in his class at West Point. Did you know that? Yeah. So I never claimed to be a Patton or a MacArthur or anything like that. But I was there, and I saw what happened, and it made me disgusted. So getting back on Fauci's lies are still being promulgated left and right and everywhere. And few people will, certainly not the MSM, won't hold him to account. I don't know when this is going to turn around, if ever, because once we started finding out what was going on with the extent sickness and their treatments and all that, then they started this war in Ukraine. Get your mind off of it. And now they're telling everybody that they really, really need to get more treatments, right? And the gullible who only listen to the MSM and don't think for themselves either are too lazy or are already captured by the enemy. They'll go right along with it. Roy's a Patton in my mind. Walter, come on now. Yeah, I just speak my mind. That's all. Which is something that several of my OERs said, and I think a lot of you already know that. Several of my OERs said this officer can be depended upon to speak his mind, and that could be good or that could be bad depending upon who's reading it. Certainly, when Petraeus read it, he didn't like it. They don't want you to think for yourself and speak your mind. They really don't want that. They want you to go along, just like Mark Milley is now. Mark Milley goes, he's been back. Oh, what kind of a general can't stay on target? Well, he sure as hell can't. And I've been calling him out for a long time. And him and Austin, for that matter, a lot of those guys. I could go back several years, even Kelly in the White House, the chief of staff for Trump for a while. And I told one of my best friends who really likes Kelly, I said, "You can't trust Kelly." He says, "Oh, no, you look, he's done this. His son was in the military, all this stuff." I said, "You can't trust Kelly. Sure enough, how did it turn out? So Mark Milley now, first it's, we're going to beat Russia, And notice, they talk about Ukraine, but this is really a war by the U.S. and NATO against Russia. Really, that's what it is, okay? And we're going to get our ass kicked, just like I said, and we have been. Russia's been pulling punches because they didn't want to go after their own people. But now, because of the way things are going, they've got no choice. NATO's going to get its ass kicked, and that includes the U.S. And we're going to try to start. Here's Biden with all these ties to China, and yet we're going to start a war with China. What? Over Taiwan? These people will do anything to stay in power. They will destroy anything to stay in power. So getting back on Mark Milley. Mark Milley goes and first says, oh, we're going to, there's nothing the Russians can do. They're running out of this. They're running out of that. Then he comes back and he says, we're in a situation where right now we probably ought to start negotiating. He said that, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And now he's back to saying, oh, no, Russia's going to lose. We've got guys like this leading our nation's military. Mark Milley, I don't want to insult Fred Flintstone, but he's a Fred Flintstone. And he's scared to death of his wife, Martha. I don't know if he's married. That's an allegory for his ties to Joe Biden and to Austin. It's absolutely incredible. So those are very general topics. I haven't hit a whole lot of information. About the FTX, the whole thing with the cyber money that probably most of our congressional, Senate, and other people have partaken in, which is why they support this money laundering situation in Ukraine. And now more information is coming out about the human trafficking in Ukraine, and of course all the others. Stuff that, if I sat here and listed it all, we'd be here for quite some time. Ukraine is the most corrupt government in Europe. The others are just patsies of the U.S., but Ukraine is just plain corrupt to the core. And that's why we did what we did there in 2014, really earlier than that, back in the early 2000s. And that's why we've done all this, is so that we could use that government. Look at Biden telling that if the president didn't fire the main prosecutor, that they wouldn't get their $1 billion, and he said it at the CFR on tape. I saw a thing on Twitter here the other day where Zelensky's sitting there and he says, "Hey Biden, if you don't give me that $1 billion, I'm going to squeal and tell everybody about what you're really doing." I thought that was pretty good. Pay me the $1 billion or I'm going to start squealing. All right, I could go into all of that. Our government is so corrupt. Look at Ray. Well, first of all, look at what Merrick Garland's doing. How can we depend upon justice in this country when we've got people like Merrick Garland doing what he's doing? And then Ray, what they're doing, and they're hiding exculpatory evidence again across the board against all kinds of people that they've set up. I'll tell you what should happen. If the military was on its toes the right way, and they're not, we don't have any friends, all right? But if they were actually what they are supposed to be, they would now be acting against Garland, Ray, even Biden at this point. The fact that they aren't shows you that we have no one. We're on our own. That's why I say, get with like-minded people, try to get out of the system the best you can. Douglas McGregor should have been running the military. Oh, absolutely. But see, if you're not a company man, you don't get into the general ranks. He was a great advisor, there during the Trump deal. Pardon me. But no, they don't let people like that in. No, they put people like Kelly in and people like McMaster. But that was Trump's fault. Okay? Anybody who wants to say poor Trump, he was taken advantage of, he didn't really know what's going on, Oh, he can't be. We can't blame him. You know what I say? That just proves he didn't need to be president. That right there proves he didn't need to be president, and he doesn't need to be again. Well, who are we going to get, Roy? At this point, it doesn't matter. DeSantis isn't going to save you. Trump's not going to save you. No matter who gets in there, it's going to be the same thing until the people decide that their state governments are going to have to do something about this. That's where it's got to go. I'll take a few questions. I mean, why not? Let's see what we got here. SEAL Team, what was that? SEAL Team 6 series proves the military is, yeah. Well, I don't even watch TV, but I already knew about the SEAL Team 6 and the lies about bin Laden. I already knew that. You know, I had a friend the other day who told me that they knew a person who was in SEAL Team 6. And they were telling me all the things this guy said. And I said, he's lying to you. He's flat out lying to you. He is FOS, full of. All right. Oh, well, how do you know, Roy? Well, I may not have been there, but I can sure read the tea leaves. Yeah, I sure can. You're worried about me, Chris. Why are you worried about me? Why are you worried about me? Because I'm losing my hair still? Yeah, well, I usually can comb it down, but I'm giving up on that, you know, and bring it down and try to, all that, you know. The reason, and I think most of you know this isn't real, right? You know that? I was exposed to some things back in my military time that caused me some problems, and so I have to have things removed every once in a while, and I'm not supposed to have direct sunlight on my head or on my skin, you know, whatever. So that's the reason why. And I don't like hats all the time. Hats get tiresome. Roy, is there anyone who is high up in the military who might have popular support? Look, I could go back further, but since the assassination of Kennedy in '63, there hasn't been anybody, and there won't be. Again, like I just said, I mean, even if Colonel McGregor, just as an example, somebody brought him up, even if Colonel McGregor could say, hey, I'm ready to come back in and I'll fix things, they're not going to let him. The people that have been put into power, and this has been going, I've been saying, this has been going on for years. It's like when I got in that argument with people like Sean Hannity and others on Twitter and here, when they were saying, oh, you know, the 99% of the FBI is good, and I kept saying, no, they're not. Those people that are at the top have had 2 to 3 decades to make sure that people like them are coming in. They're Marxists. They're social Darwinists. And Russia didn't send them. Because if you remember the history, it was the U.S. primarily that caused the Russian Revolution in the first place and put in the Bolsheviks and the communists. They're here. And they're in London. Russia is not our enemy. As I've often said, they should be our sister country. But we can't have that because the neocons, the Trotskyites hate Russia for kicking them out. And we've pillaged Russia since 1917. We have. We are an evil empire. We are the empire of lies. Grand deception. And the last 2.5 years should have shown everybody that. I still see people walking around in masks. Outside, in their cars. I'm going to tell you this much, and I'm not going to give you a whole lot of information. I was very forthright with my family about what was going on here. Okay? I told them. Most of them paid attention. A handful did not, and they're paying the price right now. Friends, same thing. Maybe someday I'll give you a rundown on that. Not right now. And there are reasons. There's some tragedies that have occurred, and if you can understand what I'm saying, you can read between the lines. It's best so I don't go there right now. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. Thank you for bringing that. Rick Thorne. Mark it down 300. Yeah, if anybody was out shopping, I went out just because I was curious. Uh, I had to go pick up a couple of things on Friday. So I got out. I mean, there were no shoppers. I walked into, and I won't say the names just out of respect, walked into some very popular stores, especially the ones that, sell things at a little bit of a discount. There was nobody there. And I even asked the store manager at one of them, I said, "Isn't this odd? Has this ever happened before?" She says, "Only during the shutdowns." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, "People don't have the money. And what they do spend is online now." This is all designed to take out the little people, the people that work in your local stores, even the chains that are national or even international chains. They're getting rid of people because you are the target. And I said that for so long. It's not even Russia. It's not even China. By the way, it looks like Bolsonaro has the military behind him in Brazil. That whole thing down there was a scam, right? Ousting him from office, I think. I think that's pretty obvious. They had some very abnormalities in that whole deal that happened down there, and the people rose up en masse. You think Americans are going to do that? Oh no, because the FBI says, and Merrick Garland says, if you question the corruption, then you're a domestic extremist terrorist. And Americans shiver in their boots. Oh no, the government's going to call me an extremist. Down in Brazil, they kicked ass. And then the military finally said, "Yep, we can see this was bad." So they're backing Bolsonaro now. The whole thing might be turned around. Our system here in the United States isn't just broken. It's your enemy. It's your enemy. And that's not really surprising. The founding fathers said that we can't hold the federal government in any high esteem. Oh yeah, some things happen in the Constitution. I follow Legal Man on Twitter. Most of you who are on Twitter should follow him as well, at Legal Man. I think it's still called Legal Man. But he says, well, the Constitution, it was not just a compromise, it was a sellout. In a lot of ways, that's true. The Articles of Confederation were actually better in some regards, and I'm not going to go through the whole history of that. But the Constitution was, when it was finally set up, it really leaned towards power in the central government, which was not supposed to happen. So they've really crapped on all of us. And as I said, I don't care if we get a new form of government. I don't care if we even go to a monarchy. I don't care. But what I do demand is that those inalienable rights, that Bill of Rights is inviolate, and that it must go along and go forward. It must. But they don't want that. They don't want that. Myrtle Beach. H.F. Bruton. Anyway, I have friends that live not too far from Myrtle Beach. So nice to talk to you. Well, I'd really like to go back to the South during the winter. I might have to do that. If the gas wasn't so high, I probably would. I'm not flying anywhere. That ain't gonna happen. We need an American Caesar. Yeah, that's true. I don't know who that would be. Unless there is a military subgroup that's managed to keep itself hidden from the eyes of the powers that be, that can take over, kind of like the Valkyrie thing, but be successful. I don't see that happening, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't. Look what happened on this situation with Russia. Found out about who had done this little deal to their gas lines, right? And Wallace, the British intelligence guy, had to go to D.C. and warn the Americans that they had been compromised. The British and NATO communications, which would include whatever was said to the U.S., had been compromised. Russians don't need to listen in on our conversations. All they got to do is look at what we do, and they know we're lying pieces of shit. We were supposed to be a light on a hill. We were supposed to show how we can be independent and free, not build empires, not make the world the U.S. But whenever you have power, you have people seeking to take control of that power. And of course, the old adage, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Looks like the military is the last to know. No, not really. That wasn't the case until this whole push towards the WOKE and the CRT started taking effect. And they've been working on that for about a decade, maybe a little, actually probably about two. But in the last few years, they've really pushed that. So right now, very few in the military are allied to you, are here to protect you. Here, I don't know, it was about a year ago, there was a female E5 sergeant that got on and said, when we come in and we tell you to get in your house, you better get in your house or I'll shoot you. I'll shoot you. That's what your military is right now. They're all WOKE. Many are WOKE. Again, what I said last year, everything was changing and that people had to get their houses in order, especially the officers, because if they stood up against this change that was coming, they'd be eliminated, either thrown out or other things that happened to them, right? Came true. It's still true today. We hear from President Trump that if he gets back in, all those that have been thrown out of the military because of their refusal to do this or that, the things, we're going to reinstate them with back pay. This guy makes more damn promises that he can't keep than anybody I've ever seen in my life. You can tell I really have no respect for him. He still hasn't pulled back on his OWS, has he? No. With all the evidence, he's still out there. Oh, it's a miracle, one of the greatest miracles of mankind. Not God, even. You guys really want him? I see people, and I understand they're reaching out. They think, oh, there's nothing else. Yeah, that's right. There is nothing else. But you reach out for Trump, he's going to betray you again. Gretchen Smith. Code of Vets. I don't even know why I address people. Mars Gold, I'm not sure what you're talking about. You say, is Archangel real? Monty speaks of how. I'm not going to get into religious stuff today other than what I have. Again, in the description box is a sermon by Dr. Pastor Chuck Baldwin that I think you should listen to. I haven't even listened to the whole thing yet. I listened to just bits and pieces, ran through it, and I thought, I think I need to include this, and we're going to talk more about this in the future. Because the churches are no longer the bastions of liberty either, not even of faith. When I put out my information there on this whole thing with how the man-woman relationship has been attacked and how they control the concept of marriage, not even necessarily the institution, how the brick and mortar and even just the doctrines that have been spun over the last 2,000 years, it's just a cotton-picking mess. Absolutely. And as much as I like Chuck Baldwin, he's still in that groove to some extent. I will, as you know, there are two things I will not give on. I will not give up that Mary was not a virgin. The mother of Jesus was not a virgin in the sense of that she had Jesus without sex. No way in hell. No way in hell. God threw according to the writings, God threw the fallen angels out of heaven because that's what they were doing. You think he's going to do the same thing? No. A good king sets the example. He doesn't violate his own law. Which is why, as a matter of fact, I said I was going to talk about religious things. But is why Darius, when he made a statue, he wasn't thinking about what Daniel was going to do, who was his good friend. And then when they came and said, hey, we caught Daniel, praying and he won't bow down to your statue, he was bound by his own law and he had to throw Daniel in the lion's den. God doesn't violate his own laws, so there's no way that Mary was a virgin in the sense of not having had sex and having Jesus. That's one thing I won't give on. The other thing is that I will not abrogate. There's no reason for me to, because I'm in a very strong position. I don't care what the Catholics say. I don't care what the Protestants say. I don't care what Chuck Baldwin says. I don't care what Mike or Dr. Michael Heiser says. I don't care, although Michael Heiser and I are actually very close in our understanding of these things. The concept of marriage and man-woman relationships has actually been polluted to the point, and it's not free love that did it. I mean, it didn't help, but the free love thing of the '60s occurred because of what the Christians had done starting about 1900 years ago. Forcing people to stay in relationships with, and they'll say, oh, we don't do that. Oh, yes, you did. Oh, yes, you did. Forcing people to stay in relationship because Jesus supposedly said you can't divorce. Oh, really? Even though the law states under what conditions you can. It's all control, ladies and gentlemen. And also, sex isn't evil, as I've said. And I'm not going to get into all that. But those two things I won't give up on, okay? Because they're bound to the very nature of what we are, what we were created to be, and are aligned, those things are aligned with our past, our present, and our destiny. I won't give them up. Again, I saw after my things went up here on this on these things on the sex issues. I saw a whole lot of responses by Catholics in particular. Catholics get real sensitive about what I say because even though many of them admit that their church is totally out of order and this Pope Francis is not a true pope, they'll even say that. They somehow say that the church was perfect back, that all the things that it came about with back 2,000 years ago, that's still good stuff, even though they have no idea what they're talking about. And the propaganda and the history has been so. I'd name some names here, some of these people, but there's no sense in me doing that. But that marriage is only for procreation. No. By the way, for some reason or other, I thought that, and I don't care. Again, those who need to hear it will go hear it. But all of my views have really dropped. I got quite a few people. I started talking about it and then I got off it. When I brought up this thing about the military a year ago that they were saying to get their houses ready, my video was featured on True News, and I've been on True News I think once or twice before where they've taken things I've said. Certainly on a lot of other platforms they have too. But that time I got on True News, I was about 60,000 followers, subscribers on YouTube at that point, and it shot up to like 90,000. Well, as soon as I start talking about the things I really am adamant about, I'm not getting the viewership, and I knew that would happen. The people don't want to hear anything that goes counter to their traditions and all of that. So the same thing happened on Twitter, and again, I only notice it. It's not a big deal. But on that one that I did, where I said sex only for procreation ? That one about 2 or 3 back, and I put it on the religion list. Sex only for procreation. It was a question. It wasn't a declaration. Maybe either way, I guess people didn't like it. It's only got like 2,500 views, and I was really surprised. I thought that would be the one that people would be really curious about, because I go into the meaning of pleasure, I go into the meaning of Eden, I go into the meaning of the marriage contract again, and that's not the only man-woman relationship, despite the way people interpret Genesis, because Genesis was written for children, that you don't talk about certain things. And even Paul said that. When I was a child, I thought as a child, but now I'm grown, I've got to eat the meat, that kind of thing. No pun intended there, ladies. Okay, no pun intended. Well, they have to be weaned from the breasts and drawn from the breasts and weaned from the milk. Given and those who can't stand meat have to have milk. Well, I'm past that. Okay, if you're not ready for the meat now, you never will be, and I'm just gonna spill it. I'm just gonna tell you. You don't have to believe it, but I'm not gonna hold back because I might offend somebody. It's destroying my faith. What you're talking about? Hey, it's time to grow up. And you Catholics that continue, hey, I don't like abortion, okay? I didn't, it's funny, the way they attacked this thing, because they saw what I did, they were saying things like, oh no, contraception's wrong because a lot of times that involves killing the fetus or the embryo. Abortion's wrong. I'm not arguing with you. I didn't say that it's right to kill the unborn child, whether it's with an IUD or some other method that kills the embryo or the fetus, up to and including abortion. I never said that. What I said was that sex is for the unification of the sexes. It's an emotional, spiritual, physical binding, and that should be respected. It shouldn't be used for licentiousness. It shouldn't be used for promiscuity. And I told you what the law was in the Old Testament regarding it. It didn't change. Jesus didn't change any of that. And you know my subject matter on Jesus anyway. I think a lot of that. You really think that 2,000 years, actually, and I could include things in the Old Testament too, of course, you all know that. You don't think that men didn't manipulate that for their own purposes? Are you kidding me? That's why God says, you can't be deceived and you need to rightly divide the word. What's in your heart? What's in your mind? Are you going to follow a pope or a preacher? Or are you going to find out for yourself what the truth is? I'm not going to sit here and recite, some great father of the church to justify it. I'm going to search the highs, the lows, the insides, and the outs. And I don't care whether it goes against your traditions or not. And I guess I'm just going to spill it. Does that make it right? No, but you'll know where I stand. I don't know how I got on that, so we were going to talk about religion. Okay, any other questions I could answer here today before I ask Lavoy if the FBI rank and file are good people? Well, we know. Captain Carl? Well, hi, Captain Carl. Say hi to Brand for me, okay? Brand Thornton and Carl and I were all at Bundy Ranch together. Carl's a character. I hope you're doing okay, Carl. I heard you're having some problems. Hopefully you're getting healed up, okay? All right, let's see. Hopefully I didn't spill any beans that you didn't want out there. But Carl's had some things he needs to get healthy and get healed up. Will we be naked in heaven? Again, I don't want to get into too much there, okay, Mel? The traditionalists talk about us having white robes, right? It talks about our robes being washed white in the blood of the Lamb and all this kind of stuff, about robes and all that. These are metaphors, okay? Remember what I said about Eden, and that's where we're going. We're not going up into some, ethereal, cloudy place where we sit on a cloud in front of the throne of God singing with a harp all eternity. That's not what it is. This is our habitation. And I put out that psalm that from the Dead Sea Scrolls some time ago. And we've got Psalms 82. We've got Jesus reciting Psalms 82 in the New Testament. This is our home. This was set up for us. And this is where we're going to be. And what we're supposed to do is not become sexless beings in heaven somewhere. We're not created angels. We're begotten sons and daughters. And when we return to Eden, we'll have our true spouse, or however that works out, and it's going to be men and women together. It's not going to be, men, all that. And the marriage arrangement, they're not really marriage arrangements. There's something else that's going on there that will occur, okay? But we go back to Eden, and I remind you, what happened when the fall occurred? God's walking out and says, "Hey, Adam, where are you? Why are you hiding?" And Adam comes out and he says, "Well, we heard you coming, and we were ashamed because we were naked." And God says, "Well, who told you you were naked?" Not advocating, topless beaches and nude beaches and things like that. I'm not doing that. There's a reason why, because we've fallen, that we wear clothes. Because we need a little discipline and we need to keep warm. And some other things. But there you go. I mean, if we're going back to Eden, what does that tell you? And the idea of our robes being washed, there's a thing about that too. Okay, what kind of robes are they? Best to be good, whatever. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. People know you. Yes. Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, you won't be able to hide what you really are, and because of that, there'll be a natural selection, so to speak, and God will know who's supposed to be where He is and who He can be with, because they will be there. Call you by name. Yeah. hmm Okay. This heaven and the one above it is passing away. But what does that mean? See, again, and I'm not here for a religious discussion. I'm going to end on this one, okay? As far as religious stuff, we need to go back to the political things on Fauci, Bear, CIA, Ukraine, whatever, okay? I appreciate you wanting to talk about the religious things, and I've really concentrated on those because I know we can't do much about the political thing. But this one was different. This one I came on to do just the political today. Please understand that. We'll get back to the religious stuff later, okay? But no, when it says this, the heaven and earth will pass away, it doesn't mean it won't exist anymore. That's not what it means. You got to read these. There's a problem in the Greek. There's a problem in the Greek. It's like when Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." He didn't mean that it was not of the world here. He meant that it's not Caesar's world. Satan's not going to control it. That's what he meant. And Satan is, that's a term that you got to be careful with. It's actually a calling. It's not an individual being like so many people think it is. And Lucifer is not his name either, as we've talked about many, many times. But this is our inheritance. This was made for our habitation, and whatever we do from here, this is home base. So when it says that earth and heaven will pass away, what it's saying is that the system of things as we have them here now will not exist. That's what it's talking about. Okay, I got to go. Again, I wanted to basically hit some political things and military things because people are wondering what's going on. And there's no sense in spending a lot of time on it. It's prima facie. It's manifest. All you got to do is see what Bob Baer is a perfect example of what your government thinks of you, knowing anything contrary to what they want you to know. They're evil. They're an empire of lies. Isaiah talks about that, ending on that. And the deluge shall sweep away. I'm sorry. And the waters shall sweep away your deluge of lies. And Isaiah's talking about that this day, and Jesus was saying that in this day, deceit would be the major problem. Lies. And the very country that should be standing for truth, justice, and the American way is the most dead set against it. As in the first Superman back in 88? No, 78, with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. Superman, he flies in on her balcony and she's waiting for him there. And she says, "Well, what are you really up to?" And he says, "Well, to make sure that we have truth, justice, in the American way." And Margot Kidder says to Superman, "You're going to be against every person in government, every person in Congress," or something like that. That's very true. They're all liars and deceivers. They're out there for themselves. Look at the FTX, the money that they've gotten from all of these corrupt money laundering schemes. That FTX one is just the tip of the iceberg. They don't care about you. They're evil. The government's out of control, and it's got to go back to local, state, the biggest. The absolute biggest should be a state, like whatever state you live in. Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Maryland, whatever. The central government is it's there's nobody to watch over it anymore. It's all been bought off. Every last jack one of them. Okay, I'm gonna lose power. I gotta go. Don't know when I'll be back up. One last time, look at the description box. Listen if you have time to Pastor Baldwin's sermon. I'm going to go listen to that sometime today in its entirety, not just brush through it. But I could tell just by how he started out that it was going to be very, very critical information, because it's exactly, at least as far as the church being used to control you and being corrupt and being really basically used as a political toady. And almost all of them are like that. There are very few that aren't. The LDS is one of the worst. And the Catholics are too, frankly. Most of the Protestant religions too, unless they're totally independent of some central controlling board. All right, I gotta go. You all have a great day. We'll see you next time out here.